doesn't matter how much you post and what you do, as long as you stick to a schedule. You don't have to do 17 times a day. It's your job to make sure that you got creative enough to pull them in at the right time too. If you do it too soon, you're going to lose them. If you do it too late, they forgot about you. If you don't do it enough, it's not really repetitive and they're not going to take action. Well, I want a brand. Okay, I like it. And sometimes we get in our head and we get stuck on something that we've created, or we go, it's so boring now because we've seen it over and over and over. But that's us. Listen, the world has not seen it enough. Steer clear of any sponsors reaching out to you before you even got a big following. Be very, very sketchy about that.
This is the Podcast in the Rough. Tune in every Friday for new adventurous episodes.
All right, welcome back to the Podcast in the Rough. I'm your host, Zebulon Thomas, and this is episode 153. Listen, today we're going to be talking about podcasting, the success of podcasting, a little bit of overall success in general when starting new projects, and social media. And in fact, let's start with social media. Social media, folks, has gone downhill. It is suffering in so many ways. We're at a tipping point, and I will say this, viewership across the board is down. A lot of content creators are seeing this, big and small content creators. However, there is still a few that are breaking through and rising to the top. There are still a few that are plateauing, but they're not seeing a rapid success rate like where they're going to be or where they want to be. So social media, I've talked about this countless times, and it's something that I feel it's not a good place to be right now. Does that mean you should leave social media altogether? Absolutely not. It just means that right now, if you're trying to succeed and you're grinding, your efforts are not going to get you as far as they used to. And there's so many reasons why, and I'll have to dive into that. I'm not going to. I've covered a little bit of this in previous episodes, but a lot of it is still so new that I don't want to jump to conclusions. And I've talked about what I know and what I've seen and what I predict. But, that's just my point of view. And what I see, personally for me, I've been taking a break from social media, not because I've been seeing, not a lot of success on my platforms or that I've seen a decrease in my viewership, which I have, but I'm taking a break from social media because I personally need this mental break. I'm taking a break from social media because I also don't want to play the rat race. I don't want to partake in this strange time in social media. Now, will that hurt my platform? Will it hurt my followers? Will it hurt my, the algorithm and how it reacts to me? It could. That's the risk I'm willing to take because I'm one of those individuals, those entrepreneurs that would be willing to take a risk, wipe it clean, start over if I had to. And I've done it several times. I'm not afraid of it. But I will say this. It does suck to start over. It does suck to rebuild. And you don't always have to do that. And absolutely do not try to recreate the wheel. Someone's already got it rolling. Ride that thing. But I will say this with social media and podcasting, and we're going to bring these two together right now, because social media might be going through a painful time right now. And there's some greedy platforms. There's some rules and regulations that don't line up. And there's several algorithms that will favor or not favor you, depending on how much time and effort you put into the platform. Podcasting, however, is a great place to start right now. It's a great place to shift your focus right now if you already got this momentum going and you don't want to completely leave. And what I mean by that is with platforms like Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok being the most popular platform that if you had to put any of your attention on and still play the game, it would be TikTok. A lot of the other platforms are following suit and designing and building their algorithm around the TikTok algorithm because it does work and it has performance and it's working well for a lot of people, even though there's still a decrease in viewership. So when it comes to podcasting, my recommendation is if you've dived into podcasting already, then continuously feed that. Don't back away, ramp it up a little bit, get more creative. And how you ramp that up would be looking something like maybe it's more episodes. Maybe it's the same amount of episodes just with better content, better quality. Maybe it's the same episodes with better content and quality, but now you're shifting that and pushing that into TikTok. Maybe you haven't even touched TikTok in a way that you're putting your podcast episodes on TikTok, or change the way those episodes look on TikTok. Do something different, creative. And so when you do this, you're going to see a growth in your whole operation, if you will. Because a lot of us are not just podcasting. We're using podcasts as a way to spread our message, build the conversation, build the community, and create the belief, if you will, the belief about what we're involved in, what we're trying to push, what we stand for. And it's a great conversation starter, and it's a great place to have those conversations, especially long and short form in podcast. So podcast is a great place to start if you haven't started already. Now, let's just say you don't have a podcast. Well, that's good news to you, because you can take advantage of this new opportunity, and you're going to see nothing but growth from this point on, because you're going to be new to the game. You don't have anything to go off of. And so let's just say you have a side business, a side hustle, or maybe you don't have a business or a side hustle and you're trying to figure out something to do and you want to do this as a hobby. It's a great way to start to explore and create opportunities for yourself with podcasting. And some of those opportunities we're going to get into in just a little bit. But right now, I want to talk about when you make this shift and when you build out your podcast, what does that look like on the other platforms that you're used to posting on? Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Well, I would say definitely keep filtering that into YouTube, especially with the new YouTube podcast plugin, where you can literally post a podcast on, say you're just on Apple or Spotify, and the RSS feed will automatically pull into YouTube, and you'll have the static image, and then you're on YouTube Music, and that's going to give you a lot of exposure right there. From there, if you'd like, use the app that I like to talk about all the time. It's called Headliner, and use Headliner to cut out snippets of your podcast, and then filter that into Instagram and even your Facebook groups or a Facebook page. But don't overdo it. Don't look at Instagram and YouTube and Facebook and constantly watch the numbers or your analytics, because they're going to be disappointing. They're going to be. You might get some success. You might get a lot, especially in these times. We don't know. I'm not saying don't do it, because if you don't do it, you're definitely going to fail. If you do it, you've at least attempted it, and something can change. But I definitely would say feed your Apple Podcasts, your Spotify, and all the other podcast outlets in the audio form so people can listen to your podcast. If they offered the opportunity to put a video up, do a video podcast. Put some time and effort into it, and filter that into TikTok and see where it goes. That means you might want to shift all of your business operations, everything that you do around your business, whether it's marketing, whether it's building content for Instagram and Facebook and all the other social media platforms, or even just YouTube videos, shift that into that content and that marketing and advertisement into podcasting. And what that looks like is maybe you're doing your regular podcast, maybe you start a new podcast and you have your own promo commercials that are creatively plugged in, where you kind of shift into that and you talk about your business, your products or services, or this is where and we're going to get into that, plug into a sponsor, right? Or maybe it's literally creating the podcast about your business. The whole thing is about your business, your products and services. And you're shifting all of the marketing money that you did into advertising what you would market and advertise on social media or on YouTube or Facebook ads. And you find a way to shift that into spending the money to put it on podcasts. Reach out to local podcasters, especially ones who have videos so they can actually see your ads, and push that funding that way and see what it does. I'm not saying you have to do this forever. I'm saying right now, try it out for a couple weeks, a couple months, see what the feedback is, compare it to what it used to be. And I guarantee you're going to see a big change in your stats, in your analytics, in the money that comes back to you, especially if you're investing in other podcasters or networking with other podcasters, because now you're getting your reach into other podcasts that have a bigger following and a bigger audience, a bunch of raving fans, and they're going to talk about you. And if you're local, this is going to be great. Seek out everyone local. And I'm talking about in the state, not just in your township, in the state. How many podcasters are in your state? How many businesses have podcasts in your state? How can you get involved with those podcasts or podcasters? Focus your attention on that. Get creative, have fun. This is going to change the game in so many ways. Now, I want to talk about some things before I get into the finding sponsorships, one of the biggest things that podcasters struggle with is the fact that they don't give it enough time. They start this off, they don't see immediate success. And maybe they think that success is supposed to happen within the first 3 to 4 weeks, or it's supposed to happen the first quarter of the year. And sometimes it doesn't. A lot of times it doesn't. A lot of times it's going to take you like maybe a year, maybe 2 years to really see the, tremendous growth, depending on how much energy you're putting into it, creativity and time, because it takes all of that. You don't have to start off with really good quality, but quality does help, especially with listening and then going into video, right? If you have video podcast, I would say the simplest way to launch your podcast or to start to make a shift and give your podcast more time that would give you the most for your time, your energy, your creativity, and build the most momentum, to give you the biggest reach too, would be to create or shift your podcast around interviewing other people, having guests on your show. Basically, you can start off with doing a Zoom. Now, the audio is not bad. It's not the best. I complain about it because I love audio and the quality of audio, and I obsess over the sound and the EQs and all that. But it's not bad, okay? It's going to get you there, okay? It's actually way better than just using your phone. However, there's some tips and tricks you can look up on YouTube. And if you really want to know these tips and tricks, just comment below wherever you hear this podcast or wherever you're watching this about how to get your audio better on Zoom. And there's some settings you can go in there and tweak to make it a little bit better, plus adding, an extra microphone instead of using your iPhone or your laptop or whatever you're using for the sound to capture your voice. Really just simple tweaks make a big difference. Now, when it comes to Zoom podcasting, I've been launching some side podcasts here and there for, different companies, and I've even got something new in the works that I'm excited about. And doing a lot of the interviews with these particular build-outs has shown to be successful. And it's quite obvious why. You find people that are interesting, you bring them on your show, you interview them, you get to tell their story. People want to hear that. Your listeners want to hear that. Plus, when it comes out, now that guest that you brought on, they have a following. They have an audience that wants to learn more about their story. And they jump in and listen to that episode, so you see a spike. Now, it's your job then to place your advertisement, your call to actions, subscribe to the podcast, invite them into your community. It's your job to make sure that you got creative enough to pull them in at the right time too. If you do it too soon, you're going to lose them. If you do it too late, they forgot about you. If you don't do it enough, it's not really repetitive and they're not going to take action. They got to hear it. They got to be told. They got to be asked. They got to be begged. Okay, pretty much. But it doesn't mean you have to sit there and be like, please, please, please subscribe to my podcast. It could be simply as like, hey, if you really enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe for more exciting guests on the show, or comment about your favorite guest here. If you come to the show to listen to X, the current guest that we're talking about today, then drop a comment and let them know they did good on this episode. There's a lot of different ways to do this. And then you can go and deep dive and, really attract more by speeding this up, by adding multiple guests, having maybe a guest host, right? So it's you, another host, and maybe a guest host, or it's you that maybe you're a solo podcaster and you want to bring on a guest host, and together you're doing an interview with someone. That can mix things up. That could be cool. Or together you're talking about a topic instead of interviewing that guest. But that, to me, is going to give you the best return for your investment in your time, energy, and what you're putting into the podcast. Because it's going to come back, because you're networking on a bigger scale. You're reaching out. You're showcasing someone else. And a lot of people want to hear that story of success, or that story of how they came back, or that story about, what they're doing different in the world, or that story about how that product was created, or what they do in their spare time. People want to learn these things. So don't forget, it's about this with podcasting. It's about delivering news. It's about delivering quality, reliable content. It's about educating. It's about talking about current events. It's about entertaining. And most importantly, it's about creating an experience for your listeners. And if you do any of those things, you're going to see results. They're going to want to subscribe to your podcast and follow you on social media, wherever that is. And then if you get them there, it doesn't matter how much you post and what you do, as long as you stick to a schedule. You don't have to do 17 times a day, right? You could do twice a week for reposting content, and then actually do one show a week and then repeat the process. As long as it's good. I mean, listen, there's no magic to defeating the algorithm or working with the algorithm or pay to play. Like, there really isn't any magic. Listen, I've seen several people just cut right through all the clutter just because they were authentic and they're likable. People really liked them. And there's a way of setting things up so that it works. Now, we're talking about advertisements. We're talking about bringing in sponsors. And before I get into that section of bringing in the sponsorships and how to do that, I want to play my own ads to give you an idea. I'm still marketing to you, right? Disclaimer. No, but honestly, I want to play if you haven't listened to any of my advertisements on my show, I want to play some of this to let you know that there's other ways for you to support the podcast. There's other opportunities that you get involved to go deeper into learning about podcasting with me. And I want you to hear these things to give you an idea of how you would create your own and plug in your own advertisement inside your podcast. So let's take a minute and go to that, and we'll come right back. Okay, once again, if you would like to join me inside the Podcast Community Mastermind Facebook group, it is absolutely free. All you have to do is go to thepodcastintherough.com/learn. That is thepodcastintherough.com/learn, and get inside the group and learn how to podcast from start to success. If you'd like to support this podcast, buy me a coffee by heading over to buymeacoffee.com/intherough and become part of the adventure by showing your support and taking advantage of any one of our exciting membership tiers. The Podcast in the Rough. All right, if you're enjoying this podcast episode, I would love for you to give me a rating and review about this podcast by heading over to thepodcastintherough.com and scrolling to the bottom of the page and leaving us a review. Or if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave a star rating and a review. It would help us reach more people and get them to learn about the Podcast in the Rough. Thank you so much for your support. I appreciate it. And those were my advertisements, right? That's how I promote, my Podcast Community Mastermind Facebook group, which is free to get in, and, how you could support the podcast. So I'm using, Buy Me a Coffee, which is exciting. You can use Patreon or anything else. And then I also have, that thing I put at the end sometimes, or I put in the middle, and that is, if you'd like to leave us a rating or review. But do you notice how I got creative with, there's audio. I had a voiceover actor come in and give me, the Cave of Wonders per se, and he did really, really good. He did amazing. Let's give it up for him, right? The comment below. Amazing. And because I let my creativity go wild, and I was like, I want to create something that really gives you a visual if you're not watching a podcast, because I don't do a lot of video podcasting. I'm doing the audio because to me, I love the audio. I want to master this first before I move into video. Plus, I do video as my main career. Like, it's what I'm a videographer. I'm a commercial videographer, and that's a lot of work, right? And I don't want to add that one more thing to my plate. However, if you've gone to my YouTube channel, you've seen the difference in episodes. I've created, the thumbnails. I've created visuals with cartoon animation, and my intro trailer is, I love it, and I've created, some animation there. And so I got creative with it. Besides just shooting video with a camera, I did animation, and that feeds my creative side. And because of that, I get a lot of questions, a lot of feedback. How'd you do it? What'd you do? Listen, it took a lot of time, but I enjoy doing it. And that's something I will never step away from is podcasting. Now, recently I haven't been doing all the creative images and stuff like that on my podcast. I've just been using the static image because I'm also testing, but it's been really busy. It's getting busy. It's summer months. It's getting busy, right? But I'm also doing some things like, if I think about this, like, okay, what's the perfect static image for my podcast? What doesn't get old? Well, I want a brand. Okay, I like it. And sometimes we get in our head and we get stuck on something that we've created, or we go, it's so boring now because we've seen it over and over and over. But that's us. Listen, the world has not seen it enough. So give it some time. Remember, we're talking about podcasters not giving enough time for it to grow and evolve into something. The same thing with the visuals. Don't change it up too many times. Like, the first couple times you might go through a few podcast images or themes per se. But once you get 3 or 4 down, pick one, run with it, get some feedback, and then just stick with it, because you just need a brand at that point. You just need a brand to get it out there. Now, when we're talking about getting sponsorships, this is something that a lot of podcasters struggle with. How do I get someone to sponsor my podcast? I need you to think a little differently here. Okay, this is not so much about how do I get someone to sponsor my podcast? Like, how do they give me money? Why? First of all, ask the question, why do you need a sponsor? You can't do the podcast without a sponsor anymore? Like, what changed? We want to sponsor so we can have some more reach, so we can network, or so we can make money on the side. We can monetize our podcast. But that's kind of like just saying, hey, if you listen to my podcast, give me $5. It's got to benefit the sponsors that are investing in you in some way. And you might say, oh, because they're getting their name out there. Yeah, well, you might be going too big. You might be thinking too big. You might be grabbing, you can't go and grab a huge corporate company that's already got, huge reach, and they're not going to benefit from you per se off of your small 40, 50, or 100, or even 1,000 followers, or listeners, I should say. So what's the creative side of this? Well, that could be, you could still be a small podcaster and snag a big sponsor, a big company, by doing a review on their product, especially if you do that review in a unique way, especially if you're doing the review in a way where not only are you putting on your podcast, but you're giving them back content that they can then use and put a bunch of money behind it. So I want you to think about sponsorships, not so much about how they can add value to you, but how can you add value to them? What can you really do to make a shift in them? Challenge yourself to make their product bigger. Challenge yourself to make their service better, or to give them more exposure. What are you going to do? What can you do with podcasting to get that sponsorships, money, attention, networking, even a plug? And so there's some tricks to that I've learned over the years. Ultimately, me, sponsorships at the very beginning, yes, they were tough, but I'm talking in my video career, my film career. It was kind of tough because no one knew who I was. But then I started asking myself the same question. Well, I could still film without sponsorships. It would just be nice that if I didn't pay for all this stuff. In my case, it was buying all the gear, getting it to where I needed, because I couldn't afford it at the beginning. I was broke at the beginning. And so I went into debt trying to get all my gear. And then eventually, by the time I dug myself out of debt and I started getting a name for myself, next thing I know, I'm being sponsored and all this equipment's being sent to me. And it's amazing and I love it. But I didn't just stop there and go, okay, cool, I made it. No, I said, if they're going to send me the gear, if they're actually going to give that to me, I'm going to treat it as if I 100% can't afford it anymore. And I'm going to make sure that I give them the best back. And that's when it got amazing. It got interesting and it got adventurous, because I started creating new ways to promote their, in my case, it was film gear, camera gear, equipment, or their products and services in a different way. And back then it was like, how many people can I get together and what kind of cool video can we do as a group of us using this product or service or promoting it, and make a fun video that can go on YouTube that go viral. And a lot of people are involved, so there's a lot of already reach because they're going to share it. So-and-so's going to share it, boom, boom, boom. And then we send it to the sponsorship, and then they love it, and then they share it, and it just goes viral. It's amazing. So then I looked at podcasting the same way. What can you do with podcasting? Well, you can do the same way. You can interview, and first of all, with interviewing guests, the sky's the limit. I mean, if you play your cards right and you ask the right questions and you time it just right, you can virtually get anybody to be on your show. But build yourself up, because like if you have say you have 50 followers or 100, even 1,000, do you really want to get a high profile celebrity or entrepreneur on your show at that moment? I mean, yeah, maybe if you get it on, it's kind of cool to say, hey, I snagged this one, but it doesn't add value to all parties, right? You want to make sure that you're having a really good conversation that is going to really hit the audience that needs, not just spinning off the higher person. So make sure here's the thing. If you reach out to someone that maybe they're not a big celebrity, but they're well known on, let's just say, Instagram or TikTok. Yeah, maybe they have a bigger following than you. Maybe you're just getting started. That's okay. If you can ask the questions and tell the story and get them to open up and then edit that podcast episode in a way that captures that individual, that guest, in a way that no one else has, that makes it unique. That makes it worth everybody's time. And that means that you've earned any followers that come from that guest, because you did a good job at telling their story or capturing their moments or showcasing them or having a great conversation, getting them to answer questions that maybe they don't answer on anybody else's episodes, anywhere. And they're willing to do it for you because they trust you, because you built that rapport. That's another great way to do that. Me personally, when I interview guests, I do it. I find guests that excite me. Like, in so many ways, like a storm chaser. Wow, I want to do that. Let's interview you. Or someone who's overcome adversity. Yeah, there we go. Someone who's become very successful off of one thing or something like, or someone who's had so many setbacks and still got back up, or someone who's going through something that I can't even imagine am going through, and they're crushing it, and they're an inspiration to everybody else around. And I want to highlight that. That's exciting. Plus, I get to build connections, networks, and hopefully, ultimately, I gain a new friend. And that's what's exciting about podcasting, is I get to grow my friendships. Maybe it's not like the friend that I hang out with every day down the street, my buddy that I grew up with, right? But it could be a friend, and everyone needs a friend. It's nice to know that I have friends all over the world, scattered about, right? How you doing? And so that's why I love having guests on my podcast. It's a lot of fun. And so when you think about the guests with your podcast and you think about sponsorships, maybe it's a one-time sponsorship. Maybe it's not a sponsor that's going to support your podcast all the time. Maybe it's a one-time. Maybe it's like, hey, I want to interview this person. And let's just say that person is trying to hit a goal, and maybe they're really good. Let's just say, I'm just going to make this up, maybe really good at kayaking, right? And they got a busted up kayak, but they're trying to hit this goal to raise money for a kayak. And you find out about it. And you go, hey, you call up some company that sells kayaks, and you say, hey, let's get them a kayak. I want to give it to them on the show. In behalf of your company, I'm going to interview them. We're going to capture this on video, or it's just going to be audio, but it's going to sound amazing. We're going to edit this really good, and we're going to give you whatever raw footage you need so that you can use it in your ads. And we'll get them to sign a consent that we can use it. And you build that, and they go, you know what, that's a great idea. We'd love to do that. Or maybe it's someone that you're saying, hey, we're going to raise the money for the kayak. We're going to buy it. But you're going to be the one that's going to put the money in to buy the kayak. And we're going to say, hey, we found a kayak that's, maybe it's your colors, right? It's really good. It's the one you want. It's the top of the line. And it's gifted to you by X company here, right? And we want to bring you together. And maybe even have the CEO or even the marketing rep of that company on the show with you to introduce them to the host in that given time. And you build hype. At the beginning of the show, we're going to talk about some things, and then we're going to interview our guest on the show today that does amazing kayaking, and they have a special message they want to share with you, and we want to help them hit their goal, yada, yada, yada. And the guest doesn't know about this. And then you go and you interview the guest and go, we have a surprise for you. And then you link in the representative of that company, right? And they say, hey, we have a gift for you. We heard about this through so-and-so's podcast, and we want to help you out, right? That spontaneous energy and that adventure in the episode leading up to this moment, all that hype, people love that. And I just ripped that off the top of my mind. I don't have it written down. I'm just thinking this, right? This is what I do. I just think. I'm like, all right, we can do that. So think about, first off, do you really need a sponsor? Yes, of course, it's nice to have a sponsor. But if you do need a sponsor to get to the next level, then make it worth their while too. Find a way to make it awesome. And I personally would say steer clear of any sponsors reaching out to you before you even got a big following. Be very, very sketchy about that. In fact, don't do it. Go ahead and seek out your own sponsorships. Reach out to them. Get a bunch of no's. And don't just send it to their inbox. There's a whole method and strategy and framework around gaining sponsorships and also even just communicating with them. And don't right off the rip say, hey, what's up? I want you to sponsor me. Maybe I always say investigate the sponsorship. Investigate who that is you want to sponsor you. Learn everything about them and say, are they a fit for my audience? Are they a fit for me? I'm excited about it. Are they a fit for, in this case, the guest that we're going to have on? Is it something that really, really fits? And if it really, really fits, then seek them out and find ways to build, email. Hey, who do I talk to about, sponsorships or public relations, right? About collaborations, about working with them, about networking. Who would I talk to? Get that email first. Get the name. Oh, it's Susie. Okay, Susie. Reach out to Susie 50 times. Don't overwhelm them, but when she gets back to you, right? Hey, Susie, right? We have this great idea, and imagine going to Susie and going, hey, we really want you to sponsor us. We need the money now. It's gonna be a hard no, right? It's gonna be no. But if you went to, hey, Susie, listen, I don't know if it's in the agenda or if it's even in the budget or if it's even something you guys are willing to do, but I would like to just propose a creative opportunity based on, this guest coming on or around my podcast. And I'm really excited about your product or service, whatever that is. I would love to get creative with this and see where we can go with this. Do you have any ideas? Is this something that you're looking for in the near future or now? And just see where that goes. And if they say, we're just not interested or we just don't have that, okay, that's fine. They're not even looking in that direction. But if they're looking in your direction, and what I mean by that is if they're looking in the direction of maybe they have been wanting to figure out how to reach more people or get on, a podcast episode or just expand a little more, or they have a little extra capital or resources or products that they can offer as promo pieces, and you kind of fit it. It works with you. That's what I'm saying. You got to build that up, and you got to think about these things. Don't just run out there and just think you're going to snag one. And it does feel good. And when you snag one, definitely make sure that you stay consistent, you follow up, you build that relationship with that. And listen, I've built several relationships with sponsors, and the main point of contact moved on or left the company or got fired, or they built their own company, right? Which was obviously amazing when they do that, because then I just moved to that. I gain one more extra sponsorship because we find a way to build, because I've already built that rapport. But I build the rapport with them, but I don't just build rapport with my point of contact. I make sure to find ways to open the door up and build relationships and contacts with the CEO, the marketing department, whoever's in the business, in the company. I find a way to be known and know who they are. And that's how I really grow this out, because not all the time do I have, the same sponsors continuously. A lot of times it's different sponsorships, unless I've planned out a whole, year of what I'm doing as a videographer, and I'm creating all this buzz with all these different entrepreneurs or whatever that is. Or as a strategist, I know I'm working with certain celebrities, and so I'm like, hey, we're going to build a campaign around this. This is the things I'm involved in this year. If you would like to get involved, there's a bunch of opportunities. We'll lay them out. And this is how you can get involved. Doesn't always mean it's going to be money coming in. I've got sponsorships that send me their product to test out, to try out, to sample, to give them feedback, right? And then not even to talk publicly, just give them feedback and give them some direction as a strategist. I have companies that send me their gear to test out and try and talk about and give an honest review. I have some that just says, here's a microphone to test on your podcast. We think you're going to sound amazing with it. And they don't even ask me for anything in return. They don't even ask me to give them a plug. But they know that when I hear my voice on their microphone, I'm going to be like, oh my gosh. And they know I'm going to talk about it, whether it's on an episode or it's inside my podcast community mastermind group, or in other, as I'm a guest on other shows, or in my, PR work when I'm doing interviews or something that's published. I'll definitely plug that. So that's exciting. Then there's also some things to think about. When you gain a sponsorship, sometimes that means that now you've entered into an agreement, a contract, a commitment, and you have to meet these rules and regulations. And that could mean that they control your tongue. That could mean you can or can't say certain things about certain things in the same episode with their product or services. That could mean that you have to deliver a certain amount of value. That could mean you have to have a certain amount of reach. There could be a whole slew of things that now you're hooked to a chain, and now you're controlled. And I've been there before. I've had sponsorships latch onto me and control me, where I'm like, oh, I can't talk about that. Oh, I have to say this one thing, and I have to be transparent, so it does make me look like I've sold out, right? Like, oh man, those are still good problems to have. But as you grow, if you know what your worth is and you know what you're doing, especially early on before you even get there, if you believe in yourself, you'll know exactly which sponsorships are going to fit with you. And if you don't know what your value is, I've seen this too. They just take on these sponsorships because they don't know their value and they think that they need them. And next thing you know, they've blown out, they're huge, and now they have a cap. They can't go any further because they're tied to these sponsorships that really work their way into it. And now they're doing damage to that entrepreneur, that brand, whoever, that content creator, and it really just destroys things. So some things to think about when you're looking at social media. That's what this episode's all about. Just where are you at right now with your social media? What are the things you want to do with social media? How have you shifted into podcast? Are you shifting into podcast? And if you haven't, why not? You're going to miss out. It's fun. It's exciting. It's opportunities. It's endless opportunities. And it allows you to be creative. It allows you to think a little bit. And there's a lot of things you can do on podcasting to stand out. So some things to think about. I really want you to enjoy this year, this summer, and also take on the podcasting world by storm by, just attacking it, going and failing forward, trying it out. I'm telling you, you're going to love it. There's so many episodes that I have of the Podcast and Rough that you can go back to, the back episodes, and you can check it out and learn a lot about podcasting just by listening to old episodes. So go to thepodcastandtherough.com and check out all my old episodes. Binge listen to that or watch that and write down, take notes. And if you want to go a little further and get a little more personal treatment, then by all means, jump inside my podcast community mastermind, like the ad you heard earlier. It's absolutely free. And all you do is go to thepodcastandrough.com/learn. Submit. There's no email, none of that stuff. You just write to the invite. Just answer the questions and you'll be let in. And then you're joining my community of other, podcasters that are wanting to learn. People that have ideas that feed that. And it's a small group and it's growing. And hopefully it doesn't get so big that it falls apart. Right now it's at a really great time and it's growing. And we're having a lot of fun. We're learning. And it's not really, really repetitive. Like, you can go in the group, you can learn a lot, you can ask questions, you can get some feedback, you can share. It's really a great opportunity. And so that's also why I want you to get involved, because you'll start to see how you can do the same thing for you. Maybe you're not talking about podcasting, you're talking about whatever it is you talk about, your product, service, or you're an expert in this area of your, in a field, and you can talk about it and build your own community. This is a community we're building. This is what this is all about. This is what I enjoy. Because when social media shifts and plays weird games and goes away, like, the community is what you're left with. This is what I'm left with. This is the community that supports me on so many other ways that it takes a lot to earn that trust. And once you get it, you don't want to lose it. And that's what I'm on, this incredible journey with podcasting. I've been going on 5 seasons now, and it's been amazing. And I've grown with it through my career as I've grown through all different crazy times in the world. And everyone, my diehard listeners, the ones that have been there from the beginning, they've been here through every word, every up and down, every conversation, every host, every, time I had to make a decision in my business, or, hey, I had this great opportunity and wow, I gain this, I lose that, I lose this, I gain that. Like, I share my hero's journey. And if you're just listening to me now and you want to jump and subscribe, that'd be great. Join my community and be a part of this from this day forward. And I want to learn a lot about you and what you're doing, and you could do that in the groups. So some fun stuff. It's exciting. I love podcasting. I didn't think I was going to have a lot of time to do this podcast this week, and sometimes that happens. Sometimes you will miss an episode. It's nice to have an extra one in the can just to put it out there in case that happens, but sometimes it sneaks up on you. You're like, oh man, like, I really just don't think I can get it in. And in my case, because I always talk about this, you can get it in. It's only 5 minutes. Just do a 2-minute podcast. Yes, you can totally do that. But I've learned, especially if you need a mental break, don't sacrifice your mental health just because you got to get your own podcast out there. Also, don't take a break forever either. Like, you shouldn't have to take a break from something you enjoy, but sometimes it might be overwhelming and you just can't do it. You just mentally need that break, and you're just like, I'm not going to perform at my best. And that was me last week. I was like, you know what? I've worked on myself a lot this past week, and I had a lot of business going on, a lot of things going on, a lot of family, fun and adventure. And I just felt like I'd spill over, a little overwhelm. And I was like, I'm not going to do an episode. And then a couple weeks ago, I missed one too, and that was a little different. And I questioned if I should do it at all, because I was like, yeah, maybe I'm not, because at that time I really wasn't just feeling. I was going through some hard times, and I was like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about anything. And I kind of think that I should have challenged myself and talked about it. I mean, obviously, it's going to be an episode I don't want to go back and listen to. But a lot of you out there are going through things too. And hearing some of the stuff I go through or I challenge myself with, it's going to be inspirational to you. So don't be afraid to open up and share, your vulnerable parts of your life on your podcast. Just do it in a way it's tasteful and enjoying, and it serves, right? And I couldn't find the part where I served, or that it was, something that would be well received, so I didn't do it at all. But I definitely do share a lot, and I get vulnerable in my podcast, and I do like that, regardless if the feedback's good or not. But I think, again, it's more like writing a book, which I have. I've written a book. If you haven't written a book, it's fun. Try to do it. At least do it once in your life, right? But if you haven't written a book yet, podcasting is a lot like that. You're laying down a story, parts of your life. It's like almost like vlogging. I used to vlog every day of my life on YouTube. And it's nice to be able to do an episode and go back and listen to that or watch that and say, wow, that's, these all add up throughout the year. You're like, wow, look what this year looks like through podcasting. And that's amazing. And that tells your story. That tells your life. So make it a good one. Write it. But don't just show all your highlights. A good book isn't just all about success and victories and triumph and beauty. It's ugly. It's violent sometimes. It's a crazy adventure. It's loss. It's pain. It's hurt. It's overwhelm. It's fear. It's all of that. That's a good book. And I guarantee you a lot of you guys have a good book if you start talking about your life. And that's a big thing right now, telling stories on podcasts. Tell your story. Other than that, this has been episode 153 of the Podcast in the Rough, and I've had a great time. I hope to talk to you next week. Take care. This is the Podcast in the Rough.